And that brings us to the very last panel of the day and the very last panel of the conference as well. Now that you've heard about all the things that we need to build, as well as all the guardrails that need to be built around those things, for new founders like myself, in order to build those things, the last thing we need is some friendly faces with a lot of money. And that's essentially our entire next panel, to be moderated by Shaloo Garg, who is the MD at Microsoft Startups. And on the panel, we have Sandhya Hegde, GP at Unusual, Shruti Gandhi, GP at Array VC and founding engineer, Ganesh who is an MD at Insight Partners, Sonal, Panda, who is a principal at Tau Ventures, and finally Raviraj, Jain, who is a partner at Lightspeed.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Great. When Kritika opened the session, she said, save the best for the last. And she really meant it. This is the last. And, as they say, follow the money. So what we're going to talk about in the next 20-25 minutes is about the influx of capital that's going in this space. And how much is it? What are these celebrity crew investing in? And some of the thought leadership that exists in the space from an investment side. So just quick introduction, my name is Shaloo Garg. I am with Microsoft, and I want to thank Ty and all the amazing volunteers here who have actually made it happen. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves, and then let's get to the meat of the business. So do you want to go first, please? How many mics do you have? 3. Okay, awesome.
Hi. I'm Sandhya Hegde. I'm a GP at Unusual Ventures. We're an early stage fund, and a lot of my focus over the past 2 years has been investing in this modern AI stack.
Hi, I'm Shruti Gandhi. I run Array Ventures. Array invests in enterprise data AI/ML companies. First check ever. Usually when we invest, there's really no other money on the cap table. And I'm very excited that AI is finally here, because I've been talking about it for a while.
That's great.
Hi everyone, I'm Ganesh, lifelong operator turned investor. I'm a managing director at Insight Partners, and Insight Partners is a private, growth equity and venture capital firm that invests purely in software for over 25 years, and we invest out of a $20 billion fund.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonal, Panda of Tau Ventures. We invest in seed stage companies, have been around for about 4 years investing in AI first companies. So like Shruti also, really excited that AI's time has kind of come now. We invest half in digital health and the other half being enterprise and automation.
Thanks, Sonal. I'm Raviraj. I'm one of the partners at Lightspeed. It's a global multi-stage fund. Invest around stages, sectors, geographies, manage around $18 billion. I've been with Lightspeed for around 7 years now, and have been invested in AI ever since. It was great to see Krishna Ram from Fiddler, which is one of the companies I'm proud to be working with, along with several others like Snorkel, Typeface, and so on. So excited to chat more today.
That's great, thank you. So I don't know if you guys caught this. By the way, I'm not going to ask how many of you have used ChatGPT, but if any one of you caught the word million and billions here in their conversation, so let's try to get into their brain power here and try to figure out what's going on from an investment capital perspective. So open question for you all. Anybody can pick it up, but I would love for this question to be answered by everyone here. Well-known VCs in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, a hotbed for innovation. Everything starts from here. What is your point of view on this entire hype around generative AI? Is it fact or is it fiction? Anyone, but I would love to hear everyone's point of view, one by one. Let's warm up.
All right, I'll go.
Let's go.
So, see, I think there is, I actually believe we're at a seminal moment in the history of software. And why do I believe that? It's, for a long time, we've all, investors, we invested in software as a category, which is what Bay Area has been, software as a category. But over the last decade, pretty much every industry, every business is a software business. So every category is a software category now. So the TAM just dramatically exploded over the last decade. But with generative AI, the TAM is basically all of us. It's all of work. And it's coming after information work. It's one way to look at that. But the other way to look at it is that if you look at the last several decades of computing, we've had rarely anything, it's always often compared to like mobile or internet, and I actually don't think those are even fair comparisons, because those were not a new building block. Generative AI is a whole new programming model and a new building block. And I think that makes it super disruptive. In fact, I personally believe it's a $1 trillion replacement market that we're headed into with enterprise software, at least. And that's not counting all the other markets that are out there, which is why I think, yes, there is always an expectation of hype. There's always what we don't know scares us. So there is this mix of what we do not know right now, and there's a lot of hype, clearly. But I do think underneath there is a fundamental structural shift that's happening, and we're going to see it play out in many different categories and many different important innovations that are coming out. So I think it's probably one of the most important things that we will witness in our lifetime.
That's great.
I'm not going to say many different things from, I would say, I'm completely red-pilled into this thing. I really, really believe this is probably one of the biggest shifts in terms of technological, innovations we've seen, and likely something that's going to impact human productivity over the long period of time, larger than almost anything we've seen in our lives. So that's what gets me bullish. But there is a second aspect of it, which is kind of scary, is I don't know how and what shape it'll take, right? There are a lot of things that become really, really interesting very quickly, and they may die down 3 months down the line. Things are moving so fast. So that's another piece, is it's going to be great, but I don't know how exactly it'll shape. And the third piece is that I don't know what it means, or it's not very clear what it means for startups across the board, at least to me. I've seen amazing product launches by established companies that are basically 10xing the experience and improving the quality of value that they're generating to the end user. So it has to be, there's a lot of caution around where you should build a company here that will be lasting and long. But net, I think this is going to be massive for all of us in the next decade or so.
That's great. Who wants to go next? Sonal, you want to go? Oh, Sandhya, go for it.
So I think to maybe add some variety to the discussion, all of us are huge believers in how much AI will impact technology, which is why we are investing in it. So none of us are going to say, yeah, it's all hype. But I think there are definitely pockets of the ecosystem where we are simultaneously overhyping what is possible today and underappreciating what's possible tomorrow at the same time, which I think is because human beings just are very bad at predicting systems that have massive scale and how things will change when change happens exponentially. And I think one thing I will point out is, as Raviraj very elegantly said, we're not, while we know this is big, we are not sure where it's actually going to show up over the long term. I think one thing I have been surprised about is how much in popular media there is hype around all the big companies, quote unquote, owning AI applications. But the reality is so far it's only the infrastructure side, just, not even new, just the cloud computing folks. Right. Who have, in terms of the big companies who have been able to impact the ecosystem. But in terms of the day-to-day products that a lot of us as early adopters are using, it's not the big companies yet. It really isn't. So I think it's a testament to the benefits of being a small startup with nothing to lose and a lot of focus, and the impact that the big companies will have in the short term. I think is where there's actually way too much hype. They have early stage demos of what's possible, but are still struggling to get all their ducks in a row, get all their internal incentives aligned to disrupting themselves. Which obviously, as investors, is a very optimistic symptom of this for us.
That's great. Shruti,
With a lot of revolutions that have happened in the past, like they've generally taken a couple decades. We see that with generative AI, it's going to accelerate the time frame of adoption to maybe in the next 5 or 10 years. Companies that are out there will start being implemented and integrated into the workflow to help with improving people's performance, their productivity, their accuracy. And like Sandhya mentioned, there are some areas where adoption will be higher than others. As an example, more than half of what we look at is healthcare, and we see that with healthcare, there are so many entrenched friction points where it just takes that much longer for adoption to come in. But at the same time, we are really bullish about the applications of generative AI in across the board in healthcare and enterprise, and I think that's just one of the tougher parts of investing in something that's so exciting, that you come across so many companies that just like to use the buzzword. So that's where the hype part of it comes in. But on the whole, excited in this space.
that's great. Shruti?
I'll be the last one, but I feel like everybody said such amazing things already. I will just add a small point that if time is our most valuable thing, and it affects the economy and the GDP of the world, then this is not a hype. It saves hours of my time already today.
Yeah.
So why would it be hype? I can write a blog post, I can scan emails. I spend hours on emails already today, and if it can cut my time,
Yeah.
even to half of the productivity that tools, that are, even if they're like little features, I'm in.
Yeah.
As a solo GP, time is the most valuable thing I care about, and it is already making me so much more productive. I know it's already working on my email right now with all the tools I use today from generative AI world, so I'm in.
That's great. So what I'm hearing is optimism, but cautious optimism, right? So cautiously optimistic. As Raviraj said, we don't know, we're in it, we don't know what's ahead of it. Based on that, what is your current investment thesis? And by that I mean, what is your selection criteria when you look at startups right now? If you've had capital to invest in companies, like super high level, anyone can take this one, whoever wants to go.
In our case, excited to say that we just closed a fund last month. And so we're in the good position where we have capital to deploy. Our focus has been, or rather our thesis has been fairly conservative in terms of valuation. And so that's one thing that we'll be sticking with unless, we see a founder that we can really get behind, especially at the pre-seed seed stage. But I think it comes down to the fundamentals, especially with the macro environment where, at this early stage, what we do look for is founder credentials, founder background. And besides building a product, I think what's interesting is in healthcare and enterprise, you don't look to invest in a product, you look to invest in a company. With the generative AI space, we aren't entirely sure whether it's going to be, point solutions or rather more point solutions or more platforms that'll be, coming out there. So it's something that, we're constantly debating and constantly learning.
So just some context about our focus. So we are a $1 billion early stage fund. So we are investing really across the AI stack, from everything from infrastructure, like the special vector databases required to leverage LLMs for applications, all the way up to applications for generating different modalities of output, right from text to 3D models and video. So we, have in my office room, I have this massive map of all the permutations and combinations of different modalities, different layers of the stack. Are the use cases for consumers, for enterprises, for SMBs? And we have kind of, at least our team, we have taken a very methodical approach to say, where do we think the most clear opportunity is, where a startup can really move fast? Because, unlike the usual status quo, When it comes to AI, every startup is already competing with incumbents, given the amount of attention big companies are paying to the space. Usually when you have disruptive innovation happen, the incumbents don't care as much because these new market segments the startups are going after are unattractive segments. Right now, they are not. So every company is looking at it. You have much more competition as a startup than you usually do. So you kind of methodically look at where is there the most opportunity. And I won't bore you guys with 20 different investment criteria that we try to rigorously go through. I'll give you one example. So one example we would look at is say, okay, let's take image generation. There are probably 20 different types of businesses, completely different from each other, that you could build on top of one dream booth paper from a Google research team. So we look at if you're, as Shruti said, if you're going to save your customer time, how much is that time worth? Because if that time is only worth, say, X dollars per hour versus it's worth 300X dollars per hour, your ability to build a compelling business can vary a lot in that spectrum. So you really look at kind of how much value can you save the customer, and also do you have a team that can move at the pace that innovation is actually happening in this ecosystem right now. It's rare to see teams that both kind of understand the technology and understand the customer they are building for. So I would say those are kind of examples of the criteria that we use when we are evaluating, how do we invest in this ecosystem that is uncertain even by early stage venture standards.
Right. That's great. Anyone else? Yeah. Go
All
for
right.
it.
So, we're a large multi-stage fund, so we invest everything from Series A to we can go super late stage. And we are obviously, if you want more detail, it's on our website at Insight Partners. We've layered out the different stack and what we think is happening on different layers of the stack. But our thesis has been that the foundation model layer, it's not a winner-take-all. There's only a few companies that always garner the light every day, but it's not going to be. And we didn't make a bet. Okay? And there may be some things that we can go make a bet on. Next is we think of a next, and is what we call the understand and generate layer. And there's already about 60 plus large language models that are 1 billion parameters and more. There is everything from open source to closed source to things that are trained on public data sets to private data sets to things that can align better. There's so many variables that the game is just not yet set, right? And then in the domain models, we're yet to see some interesting things like Bloomberg GPT emerge in various domains. That could be interesting, but we just don't know yet what the competitive moat is beyond just having deep data sets. But the infrastructure layer, what we call the build layer, there's quite a bit of things where we have existing portfolio companies that are retooling for LLM versus companies that are building new things where, whether it's vector databases or inferencing, like one of our portfolio companies, single store added vector database as a feature. Is that a feature? Is that a separate market? Does the world need hundreds of databases? Not really, but is there hundreds of databases? Yes, because developers buy them and they use them. So in the application layer, we see a lot of companies. Jasper is one of our investments. You saw Fiddler, one of our joint investments, Weights and Biases. So we see the build layer as investable. We see application layer, interesting companies emerge, but it is unclear what is the long-term competitive moat is. Anybody that can tell me today what a competitive moat looks like in the age of generative AI probably is 3 weeks behind, because everything that we thought was impossible 3 weeks ago is now solved.
Yeah, if you're thinking about, this is an interesting trend, I want to start a company, where should I look? I would say one interesting observation I had is there are industries, many industries in the world that have been falling behind in adopting technology and software. And those industries, the CEOs of those companies are probably not as tech forward as most people in this room, but their kids are using ChatGPT to do homework, right? And they're looking at that and it's like, wow, this is magical. And they're asking their execs and telling them, why are we not using this? And as a result, industries like legal and accounting and insurance in a big way, is thinking about how to make use of this technology that they've never thought about. And that actually creates an opportunity for people or for founders like yourself to actually start companies in these areas, from logistics to accounting to legal, where you can actually really build something very easily. And maybe it's venture scale, maybe it's not, but you can certainly, there's a whole buyer pool emerging, and it's a massive greenfield opportunity where you're automating workflows and also actually improving SLAs for the buyer profile, who would be very confused with a sophisticated CRM tool, but understands that if I input some data in it and it structures and gives it back, that's valuable to me.
Yeah, that's great. So, great points. One of, I would say, the talk tracks that have come up in the last few weeks, especially since January, since the whole noise around generative AI has come up, is the geographical strength. Like when we look at global markets, US is always seen as kind of the superpower where the technology sits, then we go into Israel, then we go into Europe, so on and so forth. At a high level, and again, anyone who wants to take this, where do you think is the maximum momentum right now besides US? So we all know US is, there. Where
Israel.
are you seeing more energy?
Israel.
Israel, yeah.
France.
Where else? Israel is a hotbed.
See,
India, sorry.
See, I think there's a lot of university pockets, right?
Right.
I think you've talked about, like, we all invest in great teams. That's the thing that we look for versus just the technology. There's never been a technology that has sent more researchers out of the labs into entrepreneurship than generative AI. Yeah. And that's happening in pretty much every pocket of deep research universities around AI. And but the interesting thing is, it's not just about knowing being a specialist deep researcher in a particular method of AI, or building a reinforcement learning feedback loop, or recall augmented learning models, or whatever it is, right? You have to know software engineering. We actually meet tons of amazing AI people that don't know the basics of software engineering. And they can't build a company because they don't know how to build the software, or they don't have the people around them who understand how to monetize it or how to build a great company around it. So that makes it always come back to the same places where entrepreneurship has happened. But we're seeing companies that start somewhere else because around the different research ecosystem, and then move themselves to these centers where they can get access to the rest of the talent to do company building.
Right. And I think, Ganesh, you make a very interesting point, because that kind of applies to most of the technologies in general, right? It's kind of an incubation model, if you will, that kind of expands and gravitates towards where the major hub is. Okay, let's switch gears. We have roughly about 8 minutes, so I quickly want to cover two topics. One is, look, I'm in the startup space as well. I have a lot of founders who come to me, AI native companies, founders who are just starting off, founders who want to just do something in the generative AI space, and they ask, what should we do? How can we make sure that we don't miss this wave that's right now sitting in the market? We want to make sure that we want to capitalize on this. So one of the questions that I have for you, and anyone can take this, is what would your recommendation be? Is it go run, or is it kind of soak it in, figure it out? I'll leave it up to you guys.
I'll start. Since I invest at such early stages, I feel like I'm spending so much time with founders doing this exact thing. The thing I will tell you is, find an industry you know well. Any industry, right? Like we just talked about logistics and legal and so many things. And find efficiencies you think you can bring today that were not possible before with generative AI. And I think regardless of it being a big business or not, if you find these markets where you think you can solve problems, go to market faster, right, bring customers and save them, 10x plus money, you found something. At least I hope at least you find 10 to 15 of them right away, then you found something meaningful to work on. At least I wouldn't say if it's a company or not just yet, but at least something meaningful to work on. And do that, tinker, spend time, try to solve problems. And as a lot of the people here are saying, we don't know what's going to come out 3 weeks from now and 3 months from now, but just spend the time learning the tools today and tinker as much as possible so you know the lay of the land and what's coming out every single day. Spend time on Twitter, follow the right people, and that's what I would do instead of jumping it right in to start a company right away.
Yeah, and on the flip side, folks who are like AI native, who's been there, and I know Ganesh, when we were prepping for this, that was one of the questions I had is folks who are in like conversational AI, been doing really well and now getting not paranoid, but insecure that, oh my God, like we need to capitalize on this. What do we do for those companies? Series B, C, D, good market cap, great valuation, amazing like market momentum, yet they're anxious.
Yeah, we're going through across many of the firms, or many of the companies in the Bay Area. Regardless of whether it's part of our portfolio or not, you meet friends who started a great business, they're growing it, and then this hit. And I think to add to the point, there's multiple pathways to success. Sometimes you meet an idea and you think, okay, that is not going to disrupt me because that is a thin wrapper around GPT-4. That is not going to succeed because there is no tech behind that. But you don't understand the fact that entrepreneur is amazing at performance marketing and can get distribution, get eyeballs, and actually has a deep plan for the fact that they built a thin application, and from that they're going to learn, and they're going to build their own foundation model and stop calling OpenAI at some point, right? So it's hard to predict those kind of ideas. So I actually look at two things. One is every single company, it doesn't matter whether you're a startup, scale up, whatever stage, are you actually using GenAI? Yeah. The end game is that there's going to be companies that are going to be powered by less people doing more things. And that's your new competition. So can you actually do that? Are you actually using Copilot to do your coding? Are you using other, we've invested in a company that generates Swim that generates code documentation. Is that something you can use, right? Or can you use Jasper for marketing? Can you actually apply generative AI for all your internal operations and get as much efficiency as you can? And the next is, on the product side, you've got to think about what does GenAI do to your category? Have a point of view. That doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. Yeah. Have a point of view on if you are going after yourself today to disrupt yourself, what will that look like? Because there's a lot of companies that have been built on simple rules-based, I can't believe we're using the word classic AI now in 4 months, native AI, classic AI, whatever, right? And those things get augmented very quickly with workflows. So I think you have to think about how your category gets reimagined. But the good news is the TAM overall is expanding for software, but there is going to be dislocation in the short term.
Or to add to that, customer-driven innovation or the need for adoption. So if your customers are asking, or are they really asking for it? And if not, is there an urgency to go? So that's great. Okay, I know we are on time here, just 2 minutes, but rapid fire for whoever wants to jump in. If you had the dollars, which you do, all right, you were asked to place a bet on one startup that you believe has the chops to sustain the demand of the generative AI space, who would that be? It can be from your portfolio, it can be, I'm not going to make it hard, so.
No, I think I would say, look, there are lots of interesting things happening, and I'm not going to pick one of my portfolio companies, but I would say, anything that's able to generate and build massive community around it, I think they'll benefit a lot. And I think companies like LangChain or, Hugging Face will definitely benefit because there's a lot of people getting into development and going forward. And the second thing that answering the question is going back to this, anyone building a vertical SaaS business, attacking markets where there's no solution before and no buyers, no software incumbents before, where there's greenfield market and huge wallets would be very, very interesting too. So it was cheating, but I think that.
I figured that. Go ahead, Sonal.
I think this is a really tough one. I'd like to say one of our portfolio companies, but most of them are super young, so it's hard to say just yet. But if I were to pick one in the space, maybe in the healthcare side, I like what Wobot is doing in the mental health side, where they're trying to bridge the gap where there are fewer mental health professionals and a growing demand for mental health services, especially post-COVID, where they're using, or rather they've developed a chatbot to have these conversations. It's still early days, but it would be exciting to see them actually convert this into a product that can be used by a lot of people.
Great, thank you, Sonal.
It's a really tough question, but I do know two of my founders on the audience right now. I shout out to Ops First. They do DevOps Copilot, and we have an amazing onboarding AI product also called Embark. Mohan's in the audience too, so I will say try those out.
I'll actually pitch a hypothetical startup that I'm looking for. So
Let's
if this
do that.
sounds
I love
like
it.
you,
Let's go for it.
Okay, so here's kind of thinking it ahead into the future a little. I want to live in a world where one of the most expensive things to generate, which is entertainment, becomes something we can all do easily, right? Like, I would have loved to be able to have movie making as a hobby. And it's only this year that I feel like that could become a real thing, right? Imagine if I could spend a Sunday making a movie with my best friend. That would be such an amazing experience to live through. So I think if there is a company that can really focus on generative video, way past what is possible today, given that, as our kind of global civilization is maturing, there are more and more people who are going to have careers around entertainment. We already see a massive creator economy. The younger generation of kids growing up in the US today want to be Twitch streamers and YouTube stars. I think that's because there's just a lot more automation going on in the accounting and legal services part of the world. So the new job wave that will happen will be around entertainment and storytelling, and so I think that will definitely be a company that hopefully it won't just be one company. We don't really want monopolies. I shouldn't be saying that as a VC, but still, it's not that good for the world. So hopefully there's a whole slew of really amazing companies that help us all tell stories more effectively. Would love to invest in one of those. So hit me up.
Thank you, Sonal. That was an awesome response. Thank you so much.
I would just like to say I would love to see the Game of Thrones season finale rewritten.
That's great. Okay, I think we're on time here, but any questions? Yes. Wow, we've got quite a few questions.
Can I add one thing? I didn't get to pick one of my favorite kids.
I'm sorry, Ganesh,
but which I'm not going to. But I will say one thing, which is while we invest in startups, I'm actually scared of a lot of the big companies. Incumbents have an advantage with generative AI. So don't underestimate incumbents. And in the startup space, I'm actually more bullish about vertical software because you have deeper learning cycles with your customers and your users. So I think some of the biggest winners are going to come from industries that haven't really been touched by software that much.
That's great. Thank you, Ganesh. TAM. We talked about TAM, which is all of us. This is the biggest shift in technology industry. Talked about that. Investment thesis, geographical proximity, and some amazing examples of startups. And that question was meant to be tricky by design. So thank you so much for such an awesome conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to grab them outside. Okay? Yep. Thank you.